business cycles. Yeah. The business cycles.
Katie, if I knew then what I know now, I spent the earlier part of my career as a tireless workhorse, like a hulking Clydesdale or Icelandic draft horse, pulling heavy shit for long hours and brutal conditions. When I was younger, I thought acting this way would make me valuable. So I churned out high quality work faster than anyone else for longer periods of time. I felt proud of this masochistic resiliency, even though on some level I knew that acting this way wasn't usually necessary. I have no shortage of vignettes demonstrating how little I knew about managing my personal throttle. I typically worked for several hours straight, often without standing, eating, or, yeah, even going to the bathroom. I would even be annoyed if a colleague interrupted my flow by chatting with me. I was a machine, except that I wasn't. I was a human being and one who deeply misunderstood the game at the time. I remember taking a high level job that came with its share of pretty boring administrative tasks. This was related to some of the regulatory environment that I was in. And as part of this role, all operational and financial sign offs came through me. And there were a lot of them and on a daily basis. I had offered to start this role earlier than I had even wanted. Oh, yeah, this is another thing. I used to love opportunities to show off my extreme work ethic. So I let my new boss know I had booked vacation to Hawaii, and he suggested, like, oh, we'll hold off moving things over to you until you get back. And I was like, no, 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 don't worry, I'll do it. I didn't even really think through the consequences of that decision. I just wanted to be agreeable and show him like how tough I was. So I went to Hawaii and I schlepped my work laptop around through the various islands, getting up at 5 a.m. to support the New York office. And while these approvals did need to be done, they didn't need to be done by me at the time. And in fact, I was so new to the company, I still needed someone to help me with them anyway. So, like, taking on this work hurt me in a few ways. Firstly, and most importantly, it interfered with my vacation. Starting each morning, on a beautiful Hawaiian vacation while working at your laptop is not a good vibe. And it certainly did not make my partner very happy. It also set the tone with my new work colleagues that I had porous boundaries and didn't protect and prioritize my personal time and family. And finally, it telegraphed to my boss that I was a workhorse and that my value was in productivity, in doing versus knowing. We've talked on the show before about the three acts of your career, and here's a great example of the jump from second to third. In your second act, you know how to do stuff and you do it well and quickly. By the third act, it's about influencing and motivating others to do it. It's leadership. I was making a classic mistake by relying on old skill sets instead of leaning into my third act value proposition.
As always, this is an example where the differences and similarities of our professional lives show up. Whether you're working in a high growth company aiming at becoming publicly listed or having some type of acquisition exit, or a massive organization that acts as a cornerstone in the market, the opportunity to use work to form a counterfeit identity of being worthy and valuable when, like in The Wizard of Oz, you were these things all along. This exists in all work environments. Earlier in my career, I to secretly savored the notion that I was the only person who could do what I do. And even more covertly, perhaps even for myself, harbored fantasies that everything would fall apart without me. And while the first part is true, I have a unique ability to do what I do for a company. The reality is that it really doesn't matter. Without me, they'll adjust and create a new version of things that also works. And if it doesn't work as well, nobody really cares. And am I saying I don't care? Absolutely not. I'm going to suggest that we don't lose ourselves in the process. Instead, that we stay focused on how our career supports our larger aspirations and ambitions and don't just become drones. Many years ago, I was working in my first big leadership role, and I would ride the commuter rail to work, truly a people mover. I remember looking up from my phone and peering around the sepia lit interior with all the other people and noticing how joyless it was. Folks with heads down, faces blank or scrunched, body language either rigid or resigned. And I remember thinking, wait, we're the ones who won the lottery. We have the good jobs and money. Why does it look like this? The purpose of this episode: look up, realize that we did win the lottery, and start behaving accordingly.
Hang tight, psychos. We'll be right back.
Early in my career, I worked as a field sales rep. I've talked about this before on the show. I had a territory with a list of hospitals and doctors I was expected to call on. I would drive around Boston all day. Because I was in Boston, access to the doctors was extremely challenging. There was open disgust for pharmaceutical reps and the whole commercialization of the industry. There are a lot of movies out now that can help you understand why, but I digress. My goal was to be number one in the company, and I had a post-it above my little desk in the bedroom of my little shared Brighton apartment that said, "I am number one in the country." But I hated the job. Something I don't talk about decades later, but I hated it. I woke up almost every morning feeling a pit of anxiety in my very being. I had the good fortune of being relocated to Boston from Keene, New Hampshire by a big company and paid more than I thought possible at the time. I had no family safety net, no mentorship or guidance. I was already swimming in deeper waters than my peers from New Hampshire, and I was afraid that hating my job, with 40 or so years of a career looming ahead of me, signaled doom. I often felt I couldn't do it a minute longer. How was I going to make it 40 plus years? Well, I worked and worked. I spent hours that the hospitals and offices were closed, designing campaigns, targeting, entertaining doctors, preparing for the next day. I developed strategies that got me in front of doctors nobody could see, all the while never asking for help from my manager because I thought he would be impressed by how independent I was. And as I believe, at the time, like that I was so easy to manage. So I was dissociating through work and completely boxing my manager out. Sure, I achieved my ambitions, but I would later learn that I had my boss's old territory. And not only did I outperform him, he was meeting doctors through me who had been on his call sheet that he had never been able to access when he called on them. The basic math for professional life: don't make your boss feel stupid. What's my point? I have a few of them. One, the job was never going to be sustainable, and the reflex just to dissociate through workaholism was not going to solve anything. Though I certainly didn't stop trying for many years and many jobs after that. Number two, my boss was a good guy, but I surfaced insecurities in him. And while he kept offering me opportunities for advancement in the company, he actually didn't like me. He was a really good leader because he didn't let that get in the way of the working relationship. But I was taking things too seriously, and spending a day in territory with me was a drag. And the mistaken belief that the more I showed that I didn't need him, the more he would respect me didn't help. And my insistence on having all the answers blocked me from learning more from him than I did. And in retrospect, he was a brilliant people manager, and there was a tremendous opportunity that slipped through my fingers to learn from him. And 3, nothing about the level of achievement I pushed myself to had any meaningful outcome. I mean, the money for an A+ performance wasn't remarkably different than a B+. And advancement didn't really matter because there was no way I was staying in that industry. And then last, I'd say I was like doing too much, in air quotes, as the kids say these days. And I burned myself to a crisp. And so those stories and how that played out are, more suitable for Business Psychos After Dark. So whenever we launch that, how that plays out.
Wow.
Stay tuned.
I love that you bring up your dissociation skills, and I do see them as skills because I think they're pretty foundational to hustle culture. Like our minds and bodies are equipped with tools to alert us to when we need to rest, when we're doing too much, or when we become burnt out. But if you're adept at dissociation, you numb yourself from certainly the first 2 of those. And then you're like overwhelmed when you wake up one day and you can't move, or you're just like, you can't think. Like these burnout stories are so common that people let hustle culture eat them up and spit them out. And for some people, it can take months or years to recover if you've let it gone on too long. But I think you also, Katie, brought up another really important point, which is that dissociation, even pre-burnout, obstructs your ability to read signals from others or to self-reflect on your own behaviors. And I think what you said is like, and not to apply this term to you, but like a big one here, and I can relate, and it's hard to hear, is that sometimes hustlers can be perceived as assholes, especially by non-hustlers. So like there's the trade-off here that like while money advancement near term are going to be appealing, long term you might be doing more harm to yourself personally from the burnout, but also professionally and kind of setting the tone, like your brand and your interpersonal style.
Hey, fellow psychos, if you enjoyed the show, please click like, subscribe, and share it with other psychos you know. We'd also love to hear from you, so please hit us up on our socials. We're at Business Psychos Pod on Instagram, YouTube, and Facebook.